Good morning, everybody. Jim Feist here in Las Vegas and Joe Mac in New York. Joe, are you under a cloud of snow or a pound of snow up there? I mean, I see what's going on in the Northeast, and it's pretty scary.
No, we avoided it in New York City, but a little north and west of us, they got pounded pretty good. I have a brother who lives in Pennsylvania. He got hit for 8 to 12 inches, but we survived it. We got a little icy weather, but it was fine. I know folks saw on their TV on last Sunday the Giant-Packer game. It's funny because it didn't snow like that very hard in the New York City area, but in that section of Jersey, it snowed like that for about 2.5 hours, and boom, that's right when it happened, right when Giants-Packers was going on, and
it was fun.
So everyone got to see a little winter wonderland from this neck of the woods. But it's calmed down, and right now we just got some chilly temps, and that's about it.
Well, here we are. We're Wednesday morning. We got a full weekend of college and pro football, of course. And last night, the challenge between the ACC and the Big Ten started, and I would have to say the Big Ten is like the mini tent this morning after what happened to Michigan and Michigan State.
Yeah, I would say so. Obviously, Duke really ambushed Michigan State there. And I know I had read some stuff leading into the game talking about how Michigan State had, as per usual, played a very tough early season schedule. But I guess that didn't pay off for them. And I guess we're also seeing why right now Louisville is number one in the country. I mean, they took apart a Michigan team that has been very good against the number, off to a great start with Juwan Howard. But as you said, the Big Ten was a little bit of a shrinking violet last night in the second night of the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
Well, moving over to football, we're probably Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's looked absolutely awesome, and they're going to definitely be in the Final Four in the playoffs in college football. And you know, here we are, another team from that conference, which has not done well over the years when it faces SEC or ACC competition.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we think back to the Urban Meyer team with Ezekiel Elliott and company, and they came on like gangbusters and zoomed right through it. But you're right, the Big Ten has not played all that well in these games. And a couple of times, probably the best Big Ten teams weren't in it. I remember the Michigan State team a couple of years ago. Now, they finished hot. They played very good defense under Mark D'Antonio, and then they got taken apart by Alabama and got shut out and shut down. This Ohio State team is for real. I mean, I'm not great at making numbers, but I saw somebody quoted yesterday saying if they played this very minute against LSU on a neutral, Ohio State would be 2.5 or 3-point favorite. You know, all year long, Jim, I've really thought LSU has been the best team, but I really have to say I can't find any knocks on Ohio State. I mean, even when they don't even. I mean, they played portions of that game the other day and a chunk of the game the week before against Penn State where they really didn't look that good, and they still wound up winning by margins and everything, or at least they did against Michigan. So they don't have any weaknesses. I know they got a little scared there when the quarterback Fields got hurt, and then you saw the next play or so where he just rolled out and looked like he had no problems with his knee. So, I mean, if he's healthy and he's right, this team looks like they can hang 50 on anybody. And, you know, right now they're going up against the Wisconsin team that, let's face it, wants to shorten the game come Saturday night, wants to let their running back Taylor get the ball 30, 35 times if possible. But even with that, even if the time of possession winds up being, say, lopsided in Wisconsin's favor, I don't know how Wisconsin stays with them. I mean, they played almost a perfect, brilliant game to beat Minnesota the other day. But this Ohio State team, they could go 2, 3, 4 drives and, you know, kind of stagger around, and then boom, boom, they hit you. They got so much skill, so much speed that I didn't know what they were going to make this number, and I'm not sure it's high enough right now, 16 or 16.5 against Wisconsin here. But they're legit, and I know they're part of the Big Ten, and as we said, the Big Ten has not been real successful in the 5 years so far of this playoff setup. But, you know, to me, I have to see them get into the championship game one way or the other, no matter whether they wind up playing Georgia or Utah or Oklahoma. I don't think any of those teams, if you look down the road, can stack up with the Buckeyes.
What do you think of Clemson? Nobody really talks about Clemson this year. I mean, there are a lot of LSU and Ohio State, and of course, is Alabama coming in or not? But nobody ever mentions Clemson. You remember those guys? They're pretty good.
They're unbelievable. I mean, they've won, like 27 or something in a row. And I tell you what, it's a perfect storm for them right now, Jim. number one, Dabo Swinney, their head coach, who really, I mean, I know he gets his credit, and they've been a powerhouse for 4 or 5 years or more now. I mean, he's an incredible coach. He had to change his whole defensive line. All those guys went into the NFL, and he's nurtured that defensive line. Now, granted, they all got a lot of playing time last year as backups when Clemson was beating teams 55-0. But he has really brought that defense, and they're at like a boil right now. They are really, they are peaking right now. Lawrence, the quarterback, who was awful early in the year. Some people said, well, he's off to a bad start. He was really bad for, say, 3 out of the first 4 weeks of the season. He is peaking. Right now, they got everything going on. They got 2 receivers that are game breakers. They got a running back in Etienne who doesn't get any national publicity, and all he does is score touchdowns. Every time you look up, he's breaking one for 65 yards. Clemson right now is the most dangerous team probably in that group of teams that are going to make it in. As everyone said, we watched the show last night. Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, they're clearly the best teams in this country, and Clemson has a cakewalk against Virginia. I mean, there's no way they're losing that game. They're a 30-point favorite. They're going to be in this fight, and I'll tell you what, as the guys from ESPN were saying last night, you do not want to have to play them. You don't want, if they get stationed there in a 3-spot, Clemson, you don't want to be the number 2 team because you may not make it to championship games. So right now, listen, none of them are bargains to have to play. If you had to, you don't want your college team to have to go on a field and play Ohio State, LSU, or Clemson. But Clemson right now, probably peaking more so than even the other 2 powerhouses. Real dangerous. All this talk about strength of schedule. Listen, I don't want to hear about it. I've seen this team in these playoff rounds. I saw them a few years ago. They played Oklahoma. They went as an underdog, and I remember telling a buddy, hey, this team's for real, and they took Oklahoma apart like it was nothing. They're good. They're real good, and I don't think you want to be playing them. And I think you're going to probably get some value come the national semifinals. Let's say we stick with these top 4 teams or whoever's fourth. You get Clemson against LSU, let's say, in a semifinal game. I'm telling you, Clemson's going to be. I'm going to be eyeballing them for a nice play.
Well, yeah, until you beat them, they've won so many games in a row. I guess the question is now who's coming in number 4? I mean, you got Baylor, you got Oklahoma, you got Utah, you got Georgia. Have I left anybody out?
No, that's pretty much it. It's people that are making a case for Baylor, which I did a few weeks ago after they lost that Oklahoma game. I mean, they blew that 20-something point lead. I said, don't count them out yet. There's still enough season, and they've climbed back in. Obviously, they need a couple things to happen besides beating an Oklahoma team that's a 9 or 9.5 point favorite over them right now for the Big 12 championship game. I mean, Georgia is sitting there in a very temporary spot at number 4. They obviously have to beat an LSU team that's been a mighty team all year. But I tell you what, I don't sleep on the dogs. Their defense is for real. I know they're on the conservative side as far as an offense, and maybe that's not the way you beat LSU. But I tell you what, you give me that secondary and you give me that pass rush, and I think Georgia's live this week. If Georgia can, win that game, they're in it. If they lose, obviously with 2 losses, they'll be out. And I think out of the rest of them, Utah is probably the best all-around team. And again, a team that's peaking. I mean, they've covered a bunch of weeks in a row here, and they've really played well. Now, they started slow against Colorado last week, but Utah's got better athletes than people give them credit for. They got a handful of kids that they recruited from Florida years ago, and all these guys seem to break big plays at some point in these games. So if you're asking me, if Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship game, I think Utah is the best team. But I tell you what, I do think some of these teams, Utah, Oklahoma, they're going into these games, and there's a little pressure. They keep calling it style points. I mean, they got to win by a little. If Utah only beats Oregon 24-21 on Friday night, then the door is open a little wider for Oklahoma to make a statement in their game against Baylor and maybe slip into that spot. So they'll be playing with a little pressure on them, but right now, if I had to rank them beyond Georgia, I'd say Utah is the best of the group, and but I give Baylor a fighting chance in this spot. And heck, if you get an upset on Friday night, if Oregon, which is a solid team, can pull the upset, Baylor might be able to slip in with a win and a Georgia loss. It could happen. They need a lot, but it could happen.
Moving on to the NFL, Buffalo pulled a big victory last week against Dallas, which is actually chaos down there. I don't know what the heck's going on with Jerry's world. But Buffalo is going to host Baltimore. Baltimore is just absolutely they're a Mack truck coming right at you. You know what I'm saying? And stopping them. Buffalo's got a great defense. Their offense has picked up. Their quarterback has really matured much better this year. And I love the way the kid plays with so much heart. He's a tough guy. And this is a tough game for Baltimore after coming off the San Francisco win. This is you just don't usually keep it going. But Harbaugh's a hell of a coach. And this is going to be a big game. The game was, it's 5.5, 6. I'll just go down some of these big games that we got coming off. I mean, Houston came off the big victory over New England. Could be a flat spot for them, but you're going up against a really raw quarterback with Denver. San Francisco goes to New Orleans, which is a tough game. And San Francisco was just in Baltimore. Now they got to go back to New Orleans. And the thing is, does New Orleans have a problem on the offensive line with Armitage or Armstead? I think his name is. Is he going to be playing? Because if you start losing an offensive line player against the pass rush of San Francisco, you're in real trouble. That game opened 3.5. It's down to 2.5. New Orleans is the favorite. That's a huge game this week for positioning. I mean, we know that the Saints are going to win their division. That's not a problem with the garbage that's gone on in that division. But for home field and not having to travel, and you got Drew Brees who missed the 5 games with. But he hasn't been all that sharp so far the last few weeks. And they got a lot of that stuff going on. And then you do have, down near the end of this card down here, you got Seattle at the Rams. Seattle comes off the big win the other night against Minnesota. And it's the miracle of Russell Wilson and how he plays and how he makes something out of nothing all the time. But, the Rams came off the big win against Arizona, which, they took apart one of the worst defenses in football, and Goff looked great, which he does against the bottom feeders, and he can. I mean, he's got a lot of talent. I think he's a little bit overpaid, but, that's going to be a hell of a game. And then Kansas City goes up to New England. We got some really great games this week, by the way. Kansas City goes up to New England. We all know that New England for the last 15, 16 years is just impossible to beat. But if you look at it, they have now failed to cover the last 2 games. This team is not the same. Got an aging quarterback. They got no wideouts, basically. They can't get separation. We read about it. It's all over the media. And Kansas City, of course, they got a brutal offense. I mean, they can put up points. They got a great quarterback. There's a changing of the guard definitely going on in the NFL, and we're trying to keep up with it. I started the season off, just honest report here. I started the season off red hot, 35-14 in the NFL. The last 4 weeks, it's chopping and losing, but it's been tough. Now, Seattle was a winner for me Monday night, and, you go that way. That's the way sports gambling is. It's like anything in life. You have your ups and downs, and in this business, it's the same way. So I try to keep up with everything like you do, Joe. It's not easy to win. It seems like it's much easier to lose when the bad breaks are going against you. But this week, we've got some major games in the NFL. Why don't you comment on those if you can?
We do. It's funny. You look at the card here for Week 14, and you've got a batch of games that are teams 4-8 against other teams 4-8, 5-7, and then you say, "Wow, those are the games that will get the short shrift." And then you've got really, like you said, blockbuster matchups, very important matchups, and you really dig into all of them. I mean, you said a mouthful there, but just to touch on a couple, I mean, you got the 49ers coming off playing in that rainy, nasty weather and really, really giving the Ravens a run for their money there, covering the number and everything. And now they're going into New Orleans, and I'm starting to say to myself, you know what? Like there's old sayings about defense travels and all this stuff. Well, let me tell you, that front four is every bit as good as they get hyped. They're deep. They built that defensive line up over the last 3 years or so with John Lynch there running the show and everything. And I mean, they were plucking defensive linemen in the draft before Lynch showed up. And you know what? It's all coming to the boil here. I mean, they may not be the best overall team in this league, but if you got to face that defensive line for how many plays from scrimmage, you're going to have balls batted down. You're going to get hurried. If you're the quarterback, you get sacked. And I agree with you. The Saints, they haven't. They've got a great record. They've won the NFC South. They look like they could be sitting there at the end with one of the byes in the playoffs. But this other team that's coming in is a handful and a half. I mean, the defense is really great. They're going to put pressure on. They're going to bat some of Breeze's passes down. And if they could take advantage of a weak link like a right tackle out or something, they're going to give the Saints trouble. It's funny, out of all these games you're saying, Jim, right now, and I'm always a dog player for the Jim Hurley Network, and, I'm just more comfortable in that role. But I really think in these blockbuster games, I think all the dogs look very live this week. I mean, normally I'm not a guy that has a lot of faith with the Chiefs because I feel like they find ways to lose. It's a field goal price at New England. We saw the Patriots last week. Anyone can see it. Football 101. They do not stretch the field anymore. They don't. Think about it. They've had Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon on their roster this year. Both guys got exiled for whatever reasons. I mean, they're both trouble. But they don't have a guy that stretches the field that's killing them. I mean, he could throw to Edelman underneath for 8, 9-yard gains all the time and move the chains. Wonderful. But everybody's defense is kind of compacting or condensing the field on them, and maybe Brady's lost a little off strength. I'm not sure. It looks like he's not the same guy. And this offense doesn't scare anybody. And, you look at the Chiefs, as you said. Now, the Chiefs got a gazillion breaks the other day. I mean, I don't know how an NFL game is played, and one team has double-digit penalties, and the other team has 0. I mean, that's crazy. But the Chiefs, they take advantage of these things. And they've got running backs. I'm not saying they're all Jim Brown or anybody, but they seem to keep coming out with running backs, half of them who's named Williams, and they wind up scoring touchdowns every game. And, with Tyreek Hill back and with Kelsey, a big part of that downfield passing game, they're trouble. And Mahomes, you can see, he's got his mobility back. He's moving around pretty good there in the pocket. He's not wanting to run unless he has to. The Chiefs are dangerous here. You touched on the Bills. They've been kind of my adopted team this year. Before the season started, I thought they were going to be a solid team, over-unders. People were looking at 6.5 or 7. I said they're going to be threatening a double-digit win season. Now they're not only doing that, they're 9-3. I mean, they have a legit shot with a month to go in the regular season to catch or pass the Patriots. It's possible. I know people don't think they're going to see that like in our lifetime, that the Patriots are going to win this division every year. But I tell you what, the Bills have been, and they still, to me, don't get enough respect. I thought the number was too high in Dallas. They dominated that game. I'm not saying they're going to dominate the Ravens here. I am not going to be at all surprised if they win this whole game here. I mean, they're going to wind up giving Lamar Jackson some looks he probably hasn't seen this year. The defense, people got to remember it, yeah? In an NFL where rosters change so much, the Bills had 9 defensive starters back from last year. I mean, they are solid. Their secondary is good. They don't force a million turnovers. They don't they don't pick up a lot of fumbles and pick sixes, but they are so steady. They don't let anybody really hammer them. And I can see them kind of dictating things to the Ravens here at times here. I mean, if they get them in the right down distance, the Bills defense is going to be the best unit on the field. And and then he talked on the Seattle Ram game. I don't give the Rams a whole lot of credit for beating up on Arizona, but you know what? They had to have that game. They're really, obviously, in a spot where one slip-up and the defending NFC champs are going to be out of the playoff hunt. It's a tiny price here, but I think the Rams are. I think the Rams could act, out of desperation and beat Russell Wilson and company here. Say Seattle just pounded Minnesota with the ground game the other day. They just kept coming at them with Carson and Penny. That offensive line deserves a lot of credit, but I'm not sure they're going to get away with that against Aaron Donald and company. So I'm looking at all the dogs there. I could see, varying degrees of interest in all of them. And if I had to find anybody, I think the Bills are really live. I don't think they're getting enough respect. I think obviously the Ravens are now the Super Bowl betting favorites and whatnot. I'm not going to be shocked if the Bills get in the playoffs and get in a couple of rounds. I don't know if they're going to get Super Bowl, but I tell you what, I'm not going to be totally surprised if the Bills win this game, wind up with 11 or 12 wins, and find themselves playing in the AFC Championship game. I really think the road is, it's there in front of them, and the quarterback, like you said, he's gutsy. Their offense does enough. Beasley, the slot receiver, has had a big year. They're solid. They're better than what people think, but hey, this is what happens. When you've been down for years, it takes a while before you get a little respect.
Absolutely. Joe, just to close it out today, why don't you tell us more about the Jim Hurley Network, what you got going on this weekend?
All right. We're kicking around these games, you and I, Jim, and obviously we're going to be giving out a bunch of winners here. The Jim Hurley Network, we've been around since 1985. Give us a call. We have a toll-free number. It's 1-800-323-4453. Once again, toll-free, the Jim Hurley Network, 1-800-323-4453. Otherwise, you can go online, www.jimhurley, Hurley, jimhurley.com. Get our plays. We're going to give out, as you know, we got the college schedule, 10 games in conference championship starting Friday night with the Pac-12. We usually do pretty well with them. We usually sniff out a couple of nice-sized dogs to win at this time of the year. We're going to do so. Jim Hurley Network, 1-800-323-4453. Going to have a lot of action. And as you talked about at the top, Jim, basketball, too. We're doing pretty well, especially in the NBA. So check us out, 1-800-323-4453.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate all the input and taking time to do this. The people out there love our podcasts, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, Joe.
Have a great football week. Bye-bye, Jim.
Thank you. Everybody, make sure you go to jimhurley.com for Joe's stuff, because he's a good handicapper, been around 35 years or so, and he does his work, as you can tell by listening to this podcast. So anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll be back again with another podcast later today.